Greetings and salutations, everyone. I, Alexander, also known as Sandreyevitz, would like to answer a simple question and help people to understand the following. Is Last Epoch better than Grim Dawn? Those of you who watch this channel are already familiar with hack and slash genre and Grim Dawn. In terms of value of this game, and Grim Dawn popularity as a whole has already been established with the help of its community and developers, who continuously support it with new content, but not that many people are aware of Last Epoch. I played through this game and seen what it has to offer for the fans of this genre. Some of those elements have been done in a much better way than Grim Dawn, but at the same time the others were created in a much worse style. Let's find out whether Last Epoch is worth your time and money by highlighting various key elements. Among them are the game engine and mechanics, the campaign, and the endgame modes. Before I get started, grab something to eat or drink, smash the like button on this video, especially if you are a fan of this genre, subscribe to this channel, and click a bell to get a notification on any future videos. This is a small thing to do, but it helps a lot. Let's start things through with the game's engine and its mechanics. I wanted to get things started with the game engine, because I know that if you have an outdated game engine, you cannot realize any interesting mechanics from the visual, audio, and gameplay perspective. Luckily, Last Epoch game engine is definitely better than in Grim Dawn. Starting from the visual aspect, everything looks good, for an indie game standard. You can easily notice various big and minor details on skills that you are using, armor and weapons that you and your enemies are wearing, and how the world around you looks. Obviously, this also has a gameplay element attached to it. One clear example is the cold damage type. You know how in Grim Dawn, cold damage and its effects looks bland and boring, at least in my opinion. And they do not give anything extra from the point of view of new mechanics. In Last Epoch, you can easily shatter your enemies into pieces by using cold damage, freeze them or the ground and see how it interacts with monsters' movement and their attacks. Apply various effects which will not only change the area around you, but will also improve your character's strength. Sounds and feels much better than to simply change monster color in blue and call it a freeze effect. All of this is possible with the help of Last Epoch game engine. Same thing can be said about other damage types. No matter what you would want to choose, you will be satisfied both from visual and gameplay aspects. This will lead me to another topic, which is directly connected with the stuff that I described earlier. Variations on the skills and passives that are easily accessible by a newcomer. You see, in this game, once you will reach a point where you can access the skill tree with multiple paths to choose, you will quickly realize how many options can be created and tested by using only one ability, even if you do not have any items for this. Let's take a look at one example. I have used an ability called Rife. In general, it works mostly like Cadence in Grim Dawn, and at the beginning it does physical and bleeding damage. However, once the skill tree has been unlocked, I can choose to use Rife for fire damage, void damage, equivalent for chaos damage in Grim Dawn, elemental damage, and so on and so forth, with unique attributes. For instance, +2 critical damage and burn duration against ignited enemies. This freedom of choice for your main offensive skills that you have from the start all the way until the end game allows the players to find out what they like more and focus on it, without having to worry about not having damage conversion items like in Grim Dawn, or using other abilities that they do not like just because those were the only ones which have their necessary damage type. Also, no matter what your approach to the skill selection and desired damage will look like, they will all be viable throughout your campaign and in the endgame, because of the presence of resistance reduction in different forms, both on your skill tree and on your character passive tree. Not only that, but you are not as restricted to the gear that you are wearing, like in Grim Dawn. And nothing terrible will happen if you all of a sudden will decide to jump from one damage type to another, while using the same skill setup. From my personal point of view, Last Epoch offers more choice for the players in terms of switching back and forth from quote-unquote mage to soldier, and it's not restricting in your skill choices for any particular archetype. Definitely a major plus. Both Grim Dawn and Last Epoch allows you to respecialize your skill points and passive character points, devotion and second class equivalent in Grim Dawn. This means you can easily fix your setup should you choose to do so. Although it's easier to do it in Last Epoch even at the beginning of your journey, because the only thing that you need is gold, which is easy to get in huge amount simply by playing through this game. One other thing that they have in common is the second class choice. Last Epoch at the current state does not have as many classes, however, this game gives you detailed information about class-specific bonuses, instead of vague description of an archetype like in Grim Dawn. Eventually, a player will figure out what is the best class combination for this particular build is, but when it comes to evaluating the class at first glance, Last Epoch has the advantage over Grim Dawn. Also, you cannot respecialize your class that you have chosen in Last Epoch, another common feature that both of these games share. I quite like the fact that you can easily learn from what attribute your skills will start doing more damage, in a much more simple fashion by simply hovering mouse cursor on it and holding left control button. I talked about the stuff that are good and unique, but what about strange or bad things each game has to have in some way, shape or form, right? Well, since this topic is all about game engine and mechanics, I might as well mention optimization. For the most part, game runs perfectly fine on my system on highest settings. I have Ryzen 5 3600, 16 gigs of RAM, DDR4 and GTX 1616 Ti. The game itself installed on SSD. However, there are some rare frame rate drops below 20 FPS. This can happen in an area filled to the brim with monsters and special effects, or when you are simply running through one place to another. I also tried to lower my settings to see if they were the cause of my problem, but when those drops were happening, the quality of the settings played no role in them. Some people also reported some game crashes, but I did not have them both when I was streaming this game or off stream. It's not anything game-breaking, so you should not be panicking, especially if you have played in Shattered Realm in Grim Dawn, which had the exact same problem, even on 2080 Ti. Moving on to the next strange thing. Skill amount and skill points limitation. In Last Epoch you cannot have and actively use more than 5 skills, and your skill points that you will use to improve your abilities are limited to number 20. Developers have claimed that this has been done for the sake of balancing and making your choice more meaningful, but I can only partially agree with them. This is especially noticeable when a person like me plays Last Epoch expecting more slots on a skill bar and bigger skill bar to begin with, as well as having the ability to activate any self-buff and move it from the panel for another ability. Sadly, the moment you tried something like this, your self-buffs will immediately turn off, and there are no additional skill panel in this game or skill slots. Same thing can be said about the 20 skill points number in your skill tree. Even if you want to grab anything that is connected with your preferable damage type, you will not be able to do so, because of this limitation. Luckily, every piece of content can be completed even with those restrictions. So this is why I'm not talking about those features in a complete negative way. After all, what feels strange to me can be viewed as a positive trait for other players. One negative trait which I will highlight here is the removal and/or reworking of some of the mechanics in new patches that were working perfectly. When I played this game, there was a defensive mechanic called Glancing Blow. that increased the chance of a regular hit becoming glancing blow, thus lowering its damage by 50%. It was one of the crucial endgame defensive mechanisms that was used by many players to get through Last Epoch endgame, Grim Dawn equivalent of defensive ability. For some reason, in the new patch, this mechanic was completely removed, and instead all players who had this on their item received more elemental resistances. You can imagine their frustration, especially melee-oriented builds, who suffered the most. Another slightly less impactful, yet still bad event happened when Void Protection, instead of giving players more defense against Void, Poison and Necrotic damage, had started to give more percent base health and health regeneration. That was not a fair trade, and many were frustrated about it. Over time, players have found new ways to get required defense for the endgame standards. However, this does not deny the fact that all of them, myself included, perceived those changes in a negative way. I guess the saying, "don't fix something which is not broken," was completely ignored by the developers when they have implied those changes. All in all, after everything that I have mentioned about the game engine and game mechanics, Last Epoch offers more in terms of variety through the usage of different damage types with the same skills without restricting you in a certain way. It has better visuals and sound appeal, and you can better understand what you should focus on in terms of skills, attributes and classes, as well as easily respecialize your build, because you are not restricted to your equipment in a heavy fashion compared to Grim Dawn. Now it's time to move to the next topic, the campaign. What can I say about Last Epoch campaign, or in other words, describe how I felt about the general story of this game by itself, and in comparison with Grim Dawn? Well, to start things, you should know that at the current state, the story is not fully finished yet. When it will be concluded, it's a hard thing to say, but the stopping point right now is definitely a cliffhanger. Think of it, without spoiling, as you are playing through Grim Dawn for your first time, beating the vanilla version by killing Lochorian, and having the desire of immediately keep going into the Ashes of Melmoth to find out more about what has happened and what is going to happen, assuming you are invested into the story and the lore of the game. However, Last Epoch literally stops you right after you have killed quote-unquote Lochorian, without allowing you to continue forward. Some people might find it as a negative thing, but I will take a neutral approach by saying that I do not really care what's going to happen next. I was not invested in the story at all, and despite reading all of the extra lore, speaking with NPCs and doing other stuff to learn more about in-game world, almost nothing was particularly interesting from my point of view. Let me elaborate more on that. You see, in many good games, to build a good story and structure it well enough so that it will be connected with the campaign, requires not just a simple set of dialogue options for main and secondary quests and a bunch of extra information. Should you wish to create any kind of interest, I believe your character and NPCs surrounding him should react to what you are doing and what is going on around them. Grim Dawn showed it pretty well, where you had various friendly and antagonistic groups who will act and behave differently depending on the circumstances and actions of your protagonist. Your protagonist also reacts to various events by having unique dialogue options, which creates an illusion of letting you quote-unquote speak with other in-game characters. On the same note, Grim Dawn protagonist is also capable of acting surprised, astonished, angry, with just the usage of those dialogue options. This is just one simple yet effective element that can create a player investment into the story. Unfortunately, in Last Epoch, your protagonist does not react to anything appropriately, other than the cutscene at the beginning and a few critical plot twists. No matter what is going to happen, time travel, grand battle, betrayal, being a chosen one, apocalypse, etc., your character will be ignorant in most cases and will take everything for granted, as if this game world and all of its inhabitants owns him something and nothing is capable of surprising him at this point. Even though some of those events he sees for the first time in his entire life. This becomes even more noticeable when he speaks with literal gods, yet acts completely on autopilot mode in those conversations. Same thing I can say about various factions that are present in this game. While they have their own background, the lack of any substantial details in their history, and the fact that they are split up in different timelines without having the ability to help, talk, or even know of each other's existence makes it hard to sincerely care about different problems that those people have. It's not just the lore element that feels uninteresting. From the gameplay perspective, you will not have any unique mechanics, quests, quest lines, areas, enemies, or bosses should you choose to do all the side and/or main activities. Sure, the game sometimes will give you a choice in your quest, but it's so inconsequential that it doesn't even matter at the end. Right now, the campaign itself is a more or less a filler, that you need to complete not because of the story, but because of two factors: selecting your subclass and getting passive skill points as your rewards for certain tasks. You will not even learn anything useful about one of the most crucial systems to prepare yourself for the endgame, crafting, if you were to rely on a terrible and completely garbage tutorial that game has in the campaign. For me, there were only 3 memorable things in the story. First one, time travel element, where I had to solve one puzzle to get to a certain point, like in Prince of Persia Warrior Within. But it was done only once, and the rest of it was just moving from one time period to the next on autopilot mode, because of your main quest. This is a missed opportunity if you ask me. Second thing, the arena where you are fighting against giant octopus boss Lagon. The fight itself was not memorable, despite the fact that you can see some of it in the trailer. Third thing, a cutscene that shows a fight between Fire God Phoenix, Raya, and the Ice God, Heorot, as well as Heorod's death after. It looked beautiful, but those things happen rarely in this game. All in all, the campaign and the story in Last Epoch feels uninteresting and boring in many occasions, both from mechanical and lore perspective from my point of view. It pales in comparison to Grim Dawn's story, even if we will compare just the base game without DLCs. And you should not bother even read all the dialogue options in this game, even if you are playing it for the first time. And this is something that is coming from a person who always tries to evaluate the story and not only gameplay elements in such genre. Luckily, it will not take you that long to beat the campaign, and the faster you'll get to one of the endgame modes, the monolith, the better it will be for your experience of this game, and this is when quote-unquote the real fight begins. Speaking of endgame, it's time to move on to the final topic of this video. Before talking about Monolith and Last Epoch, I want to briefly mention another mode, called Arena. For anyone that has played Crucible in Grim Dawn, or any other Horde mode, you will immediately understand the core concept. However, what makes this mode bad in the current state of Last Epoch is the absence of any unique and interesting mechanics a la banners and blessings from Grim Dawn. Instead, you have a generic element of defeating waves of enemies that will progressively become tougher, and that's it. No unique enemies or bosses, just same monsters from the campaign. You also cannot select the difficulty of this mode to farm any viable endgame gear. You are forced to start all the time from the very beginning, no matter if you have died in the middle of your run or exited from the game to play it on other day. The quality of loot there is also abysmal, and I did not find anything interesting from multiple runs. I guess the only feature that can be called quote-unquote unique is the transition from one arena to the next one after you will defeat certain number of waves. I have heard that some people use this mode to farm up experience point in there after they had finished the campaign. But personally, I do not see any reason why you should do it right now, when you have another mode that is way more enjoyable and rewarding at the same time. If you want to make a couple of runs through the arena mode just to see what it looks like, then by no means try it out. I went straight to the monolith after I had finished the main story, and I did not regret it. How should I describe to you what is a monolith? In essence, it is a set of echoes, stands for zones in Last Epoch, united by various alternate time zones with their unique mechanics, bosses and rewards. In order to progress through the story and get to next quest echo, you would have to complete a certain number of regular echos, until eventually you will get to first, second and then the final piece of this timeline story. Before you can start any run, you need to select from two options on the two different zones, and which kind of debuffs do you want in them, and also what amount of bonus towards item quality, which is dropped loot, and experience gains you are satisfied with. Keep in mind that you can reroll your modifiers for gold. However, you can only do it once, and it makes new set of debuffs significantly stronger. What is the catch? Well, it gets harder and at the same time more rewarding the more echos you are completing in a consecutive manner. Game will tell you and show to you what negative effects are you getting, how long the old debuffs will stay, and whether or not they will become stronger. If you die, you will be forced back for a certain number of echos, and to get to the same point, you will need to complete those areas again. You can pick up a ton of loot, both in the echos and after you will complete a zone. The amount and the power of those negative effects plays a huge role, not only to your build strength and weaknesses, but also in the major boss fights at the end of each timeline. In the final quest echo, you will be forced to face a unique boss that requires from a player not only good defensive and offensive characteristics, but also good knowledge on the mechanics of certain abilities. This feature is not new for an MMORPG genre, but not a lot of hack and slash RPGs took it and implemented it right. You see, in most cases, when players had managed to get a pretty good equipment, they can face tank most of the content, including bosses, no matter what is being thrown at them. Some exceptions exist, like super bosses in Grim Dawn, but even they could be face tanked with a certain builds. However, in Last Epoch, bosses at the end of each timeline can quickly destroy your character with certain skills or skills combinations, even if you have good protection. This happens mostly because there is a learning curve that will teach you their pattern of attacks, where they are placing them, and what you have to do to avoid them, or what you can tolerate for a brief period of time. Things are also changing when you take into account bosses that has second phases, where new abilities are added alongside in Rage mode, which basically speeds up their casting, movement and attack speed. Some of them have unique mechanics that will completely ignore your damage. Most likely, without any research, you might die a couple times to them. However, this is where this learning process will start to kick in. Eventually, you will get good at it and overcome even the toughest encounters. Also, the window for attacking and retreating is big enough to the point of it resembling a raid boss from any MMORPGs, and despite having multiple abilities with unique mechanics, bosses are not throwing them all in a short period of time. After you have defeated the boss of a timeline, you will be given a guaranteed unique item and a choice. What buff do you want to receive that works only in this timeline? It matters if you want to return here for a farming session or if you want to complete empowered timelines. Sometimes you might also have a choice what timelines you would want to open next after you defeat the boss in the final quest echo, or in the second quest eco. It does not really matter in what order you're going to unlock them, and some of them will be on a higher level than your character, but the scaling will equalize the level difference between you and the monsters. When it comes to empowered timelines, you need a specific device that you can click on to see a pop-up menu that will indicate where exactly this empowered effect will take its place. Sadly, at this stage of the game, nothing significantly changes in the empowered version. Other than enemies and bosses hitting you slightly harder, you do not get new mechanics, and the loot quantity and quality stays the same. However, in the future of Last Epoch, developers have confirmed the new mechanics, new loot, and new abilities for bosses that they will be adding. Think of it as hard mode in raids from MMORPGs. After all that was mentioned above, Monolith is your mini-campaign with alternative story elements, what-if scenarios, unique encounters and loot, and a good learning curve which takes into account not just your stats on a character, but your knowledge and awareness of your build's strong and weak points. It will take you many hours to beat and to fully gear up your main character, especially on your first playthrough, but the time you spend there is well worth it. I personally prefer this approach over countless runs through Shadowfell maps in Grim Dawn, because in Last Epoch you are forced to adapt to new challenges in a much more skill-based fashion, but not neglecting gearing aspect completely, rather than overwhelm the players with absurd amount of damage and debuffs in shards higher than level 80, and not even trying to balance things out. Despite the fact that I like the ability of farming legendary items in Grim Dawn and Shadowfell, I cannot deny that Monolith in Last Epoch is a superior version of the Endgame mode that motivates the player to get better at the game, not because good items are starting to drop from a specific threshold, like in level 65/66 in Shadowfell, but because you have a clear goal that you can complete, as well as many unique and well-balanced boss fights that you cannot simply overpower with your gear, which happens in the majority of hack-and-slash RPG. In my opinion, this is one of the major features that will keep player wanting to return and play in Last Epoch in nowadays and in the future, especially once the new timelines and proper empowered versions of them will be introduced. With everything that you have listened, learned and watched, you have probably made a decision already about giving a beta of Last Epoch a closer look, and in what aspects this game is better or worse than Grim Dawn. However, those of you who have just skipped to the conclusion, here is my personal TLDR for you. If you want to play a game that gives you a huge variety of options, even in a single ability, such as choosing various types of damage with unique visual and gameplay elements attached to it, and not restricting yourself to a predetermined sets of skills and gear with damage conversions like in Grim Dawn, then Last Epoch is your choice. In the same fashion, if you wish the endgame mode to have a unique structure with a separate story, tons of new mechanics and gear, as well as boss encounters, which requires not just itemization and stats check from a player, but also the knowledge of tactics against them in general, then Last Epoch with its endgame mode, called the Monolith, it's going to be your option. Obviously, Grim Dawn can offer more to you in terms of campaign, story and class combinations, but nobody will judge or stop you if you wish to give Last Epoch a chance. Despite it being in beta, content patches are coming out in a regular basis, typically once per 2 to 3 months. And on December 4th, there will be a new class added called Rogue, a bunch of balancing changes, new gear and the ability to dual wield weapons for all classes. From my part, I shared, expressed and explained everything that I wanted, and I would like to thank everyone for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, share it with your friends, as well as subscribe to our MightyBrosky YouTube channel. Additionally, you can also follow us on the social media, visit our Twitch channel where we stream various different games, support us on Patreon and receive various different bonuses. All the links are provided in the description. I, Alexander, also known as Sandreyevits, am wishing you all the best, stay sound, stay healthy and cheerful, so that we can see each other in the next videos.